I'm going to talk about sizing, but I'm also going to talk about body shape, and particularly about our perception of body shape and the difference between, who we think we are and what we're really like. So, first of all, I think probably a bit of background about us. This is an example of the projects that we've been involved in for the last 20 years on sizing. I think on our website someone put that we're pioneers. We kind of are pioneers because we were one of the first to do it. Not the first, but certainly one of the first. Up here is an example of the 3D scan, which is produced by the full body scanners. I'm going to talk a bit more about that later on. And this was a survey we did for Next in 1997. Some of you of a more ancient age may remember this, which is the work we did for M&S on body shape, and particularly the size 16 campaign, where basically it was quite obvious from the data we collected for M&S that women had got larger, so we had to kind of reappraise how that message went across to their customers. This here is the National Sizing Survey, 17 retailers involved in that, which ran between 2001 and 2004. This ShapeGB is the children's wear survey. So we measured 2,500 children right across the UK and ages 4 to 17, and we've subsequently done babies and toddlers. And last but not least, this is Invista, who you may or may not have heard of. Invista are the parent company for Lycra, and there's some work we've done for them, which I'm going to tell you a bit more about later on. Okay, so why is body shape important? Well, all of these people on this picture have got a different body shape. They've obviously got clothes on, but it's quite obvious from the pictures. They've got different heights, they've got different weight distribution. Again, I'm going to talk about this a bit more later on, but a lot of what you're going to see later on has come from healthcare, not from retail, where we've had significant amounts of funding and support from the UK government, and that's to deal with obesity, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But in obesity, the issue is still the same. You've got differences on body shape between people who are different. Weight distribution. Okay, so are we in denial about our body shape? I'm 56 years old. I'm not the same shape as I was when I was 18. I try and kid myself, but I tried my black-tied suit on a few weeks ago. There was no chance I was going to fit into it. And I think we are in denial. We kind of convince ourselves that we can fit into things that we can't, and really we can't. So we kind of have to imagine that we are who we are. So what about women? Are they in denial? Well, we have scanned thousands and thousands of men and women. When we did the National Sizing Survey, we recruited everybody on perceived size. And that was quite difficult because both with men who thought they were taller than they were, and with women who thought they were actually a smaller size, we had to recruit everyone on perceived size. And I think not for all women, but obviously women may perhaps want to be slimmer for all kinds of different reasons, but are they perhaps in denial? The retailers are kind of reacting to this kind of thing in all kinds of different ways by making sizing, what they call vanity sizing, adjusting sizing, creating branded products that kind of create a softer appeal. I'm going to talk a bit more about that later on. Okay, now we talked about men, we talked about women. Now what about children? Now this is some of the data from the ShapeGB project. And I think this is particularly interesting because this is girls, and it's the height of girls. And what you have here is two reference points. The NHS do a huge national survey on children's shapes, and the height is taken as a reference point from that against ShapeGB. And as you can see here, you've got a curve at the top end from about 13 to 14 years of age, where basically height for girls tails off. And if you look at retailer size charts, almost all of them have a straight linear trajectory for girls. Now, unfortunately for girls, most of them stop growing at the age of 13 or 14. The good news is that up until the age of 10, girls are actually taller than boys. So it's only in teenage years and then subsequently where boys keep on growing from that age onwards that it ends up that in most cases men are taller than women. But I think that's a particularly interesting thing to show you how the data can give different insights for retailers that perhaps they weren't aware of beforehand. Right, okay, now this is an extracted data on the right-hand side from a 3D scan. These are all the measurements that can be obtained from a 3D scan. And what I want to do today, I'm going to disclose something to you which is, as I said, related to healthcare, but it's significant also to retail and what we've done with it. And I don't know if any of you know how the body mass index is calculated, but the body mass index is just calculated on height and weight. So it makes no assumption on body shape and no assumption on weight distribution. So what we have here is body shape with different measurements that can calculate that. And in 2004, we got funding from the UK government to develop a new obesity measurement called the Body Volume Index. That has been developed, and it's actually now being used, I think, in 55 countries throughout the world. The reason it's significant is BMI, or the Body Mass Index, is just height and weight, but it's also invented in 1824. And I come from a high-tech world, and I'm a specialist in 3D, and I don't believe that in this day and age we should be just measuring people on just height and weight. So the reason I want to explain that, I'm now going to show you how we actually collect the data. And the real step change and the real technological, advance is that this image here was developed in a 3D scanner. The 3D scanner is kind of the wrong description, because the 3D scanner is actually a photonic chamber. You actually have 16 cameras. You have 4 levels of 4 cameras, and they all simultaneously work together to create that image. So that was created from cameras. What we managed to do, and it's taken 4 years of very hard work, is actually change the software to operate just from 2 images, not 16. And what that means is that you can now get this image and all of this data just from an iPad, and in a few weeks just from an iPhone. So it's a revolutionary step because it actually brings sizing into the pocket of most people that can do it. It's been funded and developed in healthcare, but there's a retail application I'm going to show you later. First of all, there's a very short film that will show you how the data is actually collected.
Find a suitable space of about 3 meters. Use a plain wall and soft lighting, clearing the scene of any distracting objects. Sit down and hold the iPad vertically, level with the patient or client's waist. The patient or client should be at least 2 steps away from the wall to avoid creating shadows. They should adopt the star pose with feet 18 inches apart. Holding the iPad vertically, center them in the viewfinder and take a photo. Note that the Take Photo button only appears when the iPad is absolutely vertical. For the side view, the patient or client should turn to their left, standing with their feet together and arms by their side.
Right, okay, so that was the BVI application that was specifically designed at the request of NICE, who recommend what goes into the NHS, to be as simple and easy to use as BMI. Obviously, BMI is really simple, height and weight. So to try and create something that is that simple was very difficult. But we managed to do it by, to be honest, luck in the fact that technology has moved on so much. You've got cloud servers, you've got the internet, you've got brilliant cameras in the smartphones now that enable us effectively to use the camera in the smartphone or in the iPad the same way the cameras are used in a full-body scanner. So why is that relevant to retail? It's all very well doing healthcare. You're not here to learn about whether someone's healthy or not. You're not aware that someone's obese or not. Even though that's incredibly important for society, you're here to learn about retail. So this is the Lycra Fit Finder, where we effectively took the technology that had been developed for the NHS and created it for Lycra, specifically to look at hosiery fit. Now, I don't wear tights, but apparently they can be difficult to get in terms of certain size. In terms of lower body shape for women, there's obviously certain measurements like waist circumference, thigh girth, calf girth, leg length, the size of the buttocks, all of which are important to be able to gauge the right size. So again, here's a short film that we did with Lycra and a retailer of theirs in Poland called Gata, to give you an indication about how that was used by them in stores. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this slide. This is how it's developed. So this is a precursor to that film. This is how the technology works. It basically takes 2 images, front and side. Arms must be on the side in the side picture, because otherwise it's going to increase the size of the waist. You then get 2 silhouettes. So effectively it takes body shape out of the software. And this has been the really, really difficult bit, which has taken us 4 years. So from those 2 photographs, it now creates a 3D avatar, a 3D scan from those 2 photographs. It then goes into what we call the BVI, or body volume engine, and then accesses, for healthcare, all of our MRI data on body composition. But for retail, it accesses all the reference data that we've used and collected over the years for the retailers. And then it gives the user a recommended size based on their lower body shape. So here is the film to give you an example of how that works. Right, so that's the Lycra Fit Finder. So, you know, an amazing application for a specific area. Although I'm very experienced in sizing, I wasn't knowledgeable about hosiery, obviously much more so now. But it was a fascinating project to do for them, and something that I believe is a problem for women when they're buying tights. We're now going to have an iPhone version, not just iPad, that's going to be available in a few weeks, and we're working towards early next year having a version that people can use at home, both for online purposes, so it's very exciting. What I thought I'd finish off with is just talking about some, obviously been doing this for 20 years, and there's some very broad-based issues that I think, as an industry, retail clothing has to look at. And I think for this audience, I thought it would be useful to just talk about some of those. I do think there's a massive difference between perception and reality for all of us. And I think we must all learn to take a reality check. We are who we are. And I think the whole labeling system kind of misguides us into something which just basically doesn't work for the individual. Obviously, the retailers process information and then manufacture clothes in a certain way. They don't provide, certainly the mass retailers don't provide specific size clothing. So it's a kind of hit and miss with some very intelligent information behind it. And the whole process is based on almost trying to second guess what the customer wants, hoping you get it right and tweaking it afterwards. So I think both retailers and us as consumers must take a reality check of who we are and then try and find the best fit for it. We are, unfortunately, shorter and larger than we think. As I said, on the National Sizing Survey, we found out that men, almost without fail, thought they were taller than they actually are, and women think they are a smaller size. And, you know, when you get phone calls from some of the staff that say, I've recruited her as a size 12, but she is actually an 18, we still have to treat them as a size 12. So we have to really think about, you know, buying clothes should be a relatively painless experience. So hopefully there's ways we can address that in the future. We cannot control, or we should want to control, our genetics. We did a fascinating project years ago. We actually measured fathers and sons. And it was fascinating, particularly with the limbs. The arms and the legs were very similar, irrespective of the generational gap. Instantly, the second generation were taller, and I think the increase of height is something that really shouldn't be underestimated. When we looked at the comparative data on children from our survey compared to the British standard from 1990, height was one of the key issues, and I'm sure any of you with children will know that actually children, particularly in teenage years, are often as tall as the adults that are transporting them around. So we will change with age, no matter how hard we try. And I think we all feel perhaps younger than we actually are, and there are some things we just have no control over. This isn't an issue of style, it's more to do with size and fit and comfort, and we have to perhaps sometimes adjust to that. And we can work with and not against our body shape. I mean, I think there is a sea change of all of us in the retail buying process, that we kind of expect the retailers to sort it out for us. And I personally believe that's wrong. I think we've got to take more responsibility and think, okay, they're doing the best job they can. And okay, you may go to a store and there's different sizes in all the stores, or you might have different sizes between the stores, but actually, it's something that I think we have to address and take on board. And what we see isn't always real, like feet. And I'll talk about feet in a minute, but another thing we found quite interesting from the children's survey is that without fail, for boys and girls from all ages 4 to 17, the right leg and the right arm were all bigger in all cases. That's 4 to 17, boys and girls. And we found this data absolutely fascinating. We couldn't understand why. And the only thing we could explain it by is thinking people go upstairs with their right leg, they kick a football, or they hit a tennis ball with their main arm, and I think it's about 85% of us are right-footed or right-handed. Strange things like, running tracks are anti-clockwise, so you're always leading on the right foot if you do run. These are anecdotal things, but it's the only reason we could explain such a conclusive proof that right leg and left leg and right arm and left arm, it's always the right that's bigger. Now, regarding the feet, some of you may know this. If you don't, again, this is how sometimes we can perceive things, and they are different. And if you imagine you're like holding a phone, so you're looking at your phone like that, your foot is, for most people, is from the wrist to the crook of the elbow. Now, you look at it and you think, no way. But I promise you, in most cases, that's the case. It's an obvious thing, really, because, of course, you're looking at it at a shorter distance. But I'm just illustrating that to show you that we sometimes have to take a reality check of who we are and what body shape we are. So how do we move forward on this? Well, I do think the retailers have a responsibility to provide better signage, better guidance and flexibility. That's both in terms of their ranges of grading and blocks. Better signage as in better labelling. One of the key factors we found on the children's survey, and there were 6 retailers involved in that, M&S, Next, Tesco's, Georgia Asda, Shop Direct, and Monsoon. They accounted for about 47% of the children's wear market, and one very key factor we found is that height is a much better sweet spot for the retailers than age. So for any buyer, height is a much better way of actually buying something for children than age. So that would start to permeate through into the retailer process, because they all took it on board, and that would start to change in terms of the messaging and in terms of the labelling. We need to have better awareness and understanding. We need to realise there are certain groups, particularly those who are maybe conscious of their body shape, the elderly, certain ethnic groups that have a different body shape. We need to understand that and cater for those groups as well. Size is demeaning, shape is meaning. What I mean by that is I'll be honest, I find the sizing system bizarre, particularly for women, but also for men, where basically you get larger and your number goes up by 2 digits. And it's a very psychological problem for people to deal with. And I think body shape is much softer. Evans did some work a few years ago where they had certain symbols to describe their body shapes, hourglass, apple, pear. And obviously their clientele is particularly geared to a certain type of the population. And I think they were very conscious that it was a softer message of kind of getting the information over to the consumer without being too prescriptive about it. And the last thing is just say that there's always someone worse off than you. One of the most interesting interviews I saw a few years ago was with one of the supermodels who said, I feel ugly, I don't feel I'm pretty at all. And when you've got people like that who do believe they're not perfect when actually everyone else does, I think all of us need to think, as I said, take a bit of a reality check. Over time, I think things will change as retailers look at body shape more than sizing. It's going to take a while, but I think I think over time it will happen because there's a realization amongst the people that design the clothing specs that that's really what people want, a seamless, easy-to-use way. And so hopefully that will change as things move in the future. There's a ShapeGB website with information about the children's survey if you want to have a look at it, and the body volume site about BVI, which obviously is, for different reasons, an important development for healthcare. Thank you very much.